Alright, this first one is a silent killer and can cost you thousands of monies every year. Let me introduce you to the mysterious pricing pyramid. So basically, all of our properties live on this pyramid. There's a couple of properties at the top that can charge the most, and then there's tons of properties at the bottom, all trying to be the cheapest. And your place on the pyramid depends on how nice it is and how in demand that the property is.
Makes sense.
And once your property's live, you get your spot, and that's it. But the problem is, you never actually get told where your spot is. Told you it was mysterious. So it's our job to figure out whereabouts we live on this pyramid. But I see loads of hosts who are just winging it. Now maybe their spot is here, but they actually charge nightly rates from down here. Well, these people are going to see bookings absolutely flying. They could even be at 100% occupancy. They'll be feeling pretty good about themselves.
I do rock.
But that occupancy comes at the expense of potentially thousands of pounds of profit every month, because they're leaving money on the table and not charging the nightly rates that they could be. And it works both ways. Properties who are actually here but think that they're up here, these properties might sell in busy periods and at weekends, but there are going to be huge gaps in that calendar, and honestly the property is not going to make any money at all. And so mistake number one is mispricing your property. Going too low leaves money on the table, and going too high reduces occupancy. So what's the solution? Before you get started, make absolutely crystal clear sure that you know what your property can be charging. So do market research, use Airbnb, compare similar listings and base your prices off that. But also crucially, adjust your prices regularly based on seasonality, demand, day of the week, the amount of guests that are coming. Now the absolute best way to do this is to use a tool called Price Labs or any other rate pricing software. This is going to adjust your rates automatically, like countless times a day, to make sure you always get the best rates possible. It goes up when it needs to and down when it needs to. Now in my business, we operate over 75 properties, doing over 18,000 guests a year. And since we turned on Price Labs, our booking revenue went higher than £4 million a year. That was an increase of over 20% just from turning on Price Labs. Now you do have to pay for this, it's well worth the investment, but if you want to do it yourself, I've got a full pricing strategy workbook as well as tons of other valuable resources in my Airbnb Success Blueprint, the link below. Alright, this next mistake is cataclysmic. It's apocalyptic.
That sounds serious.
It's a career ending, lights out, good night sweetheart kind of mistake. Imagine spending all that money kitting out your place to be the best property in town. Furniture, the fixtures, the fittings, the photos, all the time you invested watching my videos, reading my book, figuring out how to actually run the business. You didn't spend the 5 minutes that it takes to figure out whether you're actually allowed to open an Airbnb where your property is. And then a couple of weeks after you go live, you get a letter from the city council or the state or whoever the housing overlords are in your area ordering you to stop. And so mistake number two is posting without following the rules and the regulations can lead to hefty fines or even just lights out. So what's the solution? Well, before you do anything, before you buy a property, before you start renting it, carefully research and understand the local regulations where you are. If you need to, get the necessary permits, get the planning permission if you need to. Whatever you do, just do things by the book, because you do not want to spend all that money getting set up just to get shut down. And this next mistake is like going to the gym and getting absolutely shredded, but then walking around in like a big baggy hoodie. You've put in all that hard work and you're doing nothing to show it off. Your property is a product and Airbnb is the shop window that you get to show it off in. But if you have poor photos, a poor title, poor description, it's like an actual shop window covered in dust and grime and crap. Customers, or in our case guests, are just going to walk on by without even bothering to come in. And so mistake number three is that low quality photos and vague, poor titles and descriptions will reduce bookings and perceived value of your place, and you just won't make any money. So what's the solution here? Well, first off, invest. Spend a little bit of money to get a professional photographer to come in, stage it before they come in, get it looking absolutely incredible, show it off in its best light. Next, come up with a killer, intriguing title showcasing the best stuff that your property has to offer, right? An amazing, compelling description that's just going to make people read it and go,
oh my god, I need to stay in this place.
And again, there's a photography guide as well as loads of other guides about how to write banging titles and descriptions in the blueprint below. This next mistake is a really easy one to make and kind of hard to get away from making. The best we can do is to put systems in place and manage it. So let me explain. So host A sets no restrictions on his bookings and his calendar fills up with a mixture of 1 and 2 night stays. In 1 week, he has 100% occupancy from 4 bookings and earns £1,000. Now, if his cleaning costs are £80, he's left with £680 profit. Very simplified numbers. There are obviously other costs, but for the sake of this, just bear with me. Now host B, well, he doesn't take one night stays. He actually has a minimum stay of 3. So he gets 2 bookings in and he decides, you know what, I'm just going to leave that night free. At the same nightly rate, his booking income is only £850. But crucially, he only has 2 cleans. So he actually ends up with £692 profit. More than host A, even though he has 1 night unsold. So mistake number 4 is overlooking the cost and frequency of those cleans, because if you do, it can quickly just erode your profits. So what's the solution here? Well, it's really important that you get a handle and carefully consider your changeover costs. So it's not just cleaning, it's the linen, it's any welcome pack items, all that sort of stuff that needs done with every changeover. And you then have to try and factor those into your nightly rates. So if you're taking 1 night stays, make sure the 1 night stay rate is super high so that it's still going to be profitable. And then also, if you're going to take longer stays, which are going to be more profitable because you have less changeovers, you can afford to discount those, which will make them more attractive to those guests. Now, I'm not specifically talking about a cleaning fee here. I personally really don't like that. I don't like whenever you see a nightly rate, you go to confirm and then multiple other charges are added on there. I much prefer to just incorporate it into the nightly rate. You're going to get a better response from your guests anyway if you ask them to tidy up at the end of their stay. And this next mistake, it is a horrible one to make, but I feel like it's almost like a rite of passage for hosts before we can actually say that we're experienced at what we do. You hear the horror stories, you read the newspaper reports, and you think,
Oh my god, that's terrible. I hope that never happens to me.
and then it does. There's a reason why protection is one of my 5-star fundamentals, which you can see in my Amazon #1 best-selling book, Short-Term Rental Revolution. Link below, shameless plug. Because just one bad guest can cost you hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. And so mistake number 5 is accepting guests without a thorough vetting procedure can result in property damage, disputes, negative reviews, higher costs, poorer reputation, annoyed cleaners. The list goes on. And so how do you avoid this? Well, basically, you have to vet all your guests. Vet every booking before you accept it or before you send out key codes. At the time of booking, you need to clearly outline expectations for those guests. What is allowed, what is not. Set firm but reasonable house rules. These are not here to annoy a family or any normal guest. These are here to put off partiers, prostitutes, pets, all the P's. Review the guest profiles. Talk to them. Find out why are they coming to your property. Communicate clearly before they arrive. Just let them know quiet hours, any security deposits, minimum age requirements. But please, whatever you do, please do something. Do not get stung by this. And so I've got that entire section on protection in my book, and I've also got a vetting procedure that we use in my business, as well as house rule template in the blueprint below. Next up, and imagine you're going skydiving. You decide not to bother with a backup parachute. Chances are you'll be fine, but if something does go wrong, the consequences will be suboptimal. Now remember these bad guests that you didn't vet properly? Well, when they cause damage and you confidently stride up to the Airbnb air cover door and start banging on it, requesting compensation, don't be surprised if it gets slammed in your face. The thing about Airbnb is that they really like their guests. I mean, really like them. Us hosts, yeah, kind of alright, yeah. And so mistake number 6 is assuming that Airbnb's host protection is going to come and save you like a white knight. If you believe that, you're going to get stung and exposed financially. So what's the solution here? Well, first of all, do not solely rely on Airbnb's host protection. Any excuse they can get to get out of paying you, they will take. Get specialized short-term rental insurance. This is going to properly and comprehensively cover you against property damage, theft, injuries to your guests, any sort of accidents that Airbnb's air cover will just wash their hands of. This next mistake is another one that I see so many new Airbnb hosts make. I made it too. Do you ever have one of those days where you feel like you're being pulled in a million different directions? If you're a parent of several young children like I am, then that's just every day. So you're trying to cook dinner, one kid is screaming at you to come and wipe his bum, the other's having a meltdown because he changed the audio on Netflix to Spanish, the baby's thrown up on the sofa, but it's alright because the dog's licking it up. You have a really important email that you know you need to reply to, but at the same time your wife's messaging you about your anniversary that's coming up. Do you ever have a day like that? That was yesterday. Well, that's what running an Airbnb can feel like right at the start, especially if you're trying to wear all the hats. You can't get anything done properly and you just feel like you're constantly chasing your tail. And so the mistake here is that by trying to do everything yourself, you can just get completely overwhelmed. So the solution here is systemizing, automating and delegating. Again, there's an entire section in my book dedicated to this called processes, but really you need to be thinking about what are all the low value, repetitive tasks that are clogging up my time that I can get either a person to do or an algorithm to do. This is things like cleaning, this is things like automated messaging, this is things like the rate pricing software that we already talked about. You need to try and get as many jobs off your plate so that you can focus on the higher value, more vital tasks that only you as the business owner can do. I've been there. When I had 2 properties, I was still working full-time, shift work. I was able to sort of juggle everything, but I was doing the cleaning. I was meeting all the guests. I was doing all the communicating. You know what? Whenever I quit work to focus on Airbnb full-time, I actually ended up working more on the Airbnb business than I was working full-time. And I was stuck, I was overwhelmed, I had no capacity to grow. So if you want a business or a side hustle that facilitates your own life as opposed to replacing your time with another job, you have to look at systemizing and outsourcing things. And the best way to do that is to watch this video next, which is going to show you all the tech, all the things that you can do to automate your Airbnb business. I'll see you in that one.